Hello again, it's Ace. Welcome to a new video about AsyncAPI. If you want to know more about the specification, just check the previous video on what is AsyncAPI. In today's video, we're going to be discussing what AsyncAPI and OpenAPI have in common and how they differ. Ready or not, here we go. OpenAPI is a standard for describing APIs. This specification defines an open vendor independent description format for API services. In particular, OpenAPI can describe, develop, test, and document REST-compliant APIs. Understood as a software architecture for hypermedia systems on the World Wide Web, REST often uses the HTTP protocol. The current OpenAPI specification grew out of the predecessor project known as Swagger. The development company SmartBear subjected the existing Swagger specification to an open license, handing both over maintenance and development of the initiative to the Linux Foundation. In addition to SmartBear, members of the OpenAPI initiative include industry giants such as Google, IBM, and Microsoft. Now, let's look at the similarities between AsyncAPI and OpenAPI. AsyncAPI's ultimate goal is to make working with event-driven architecture as simple as working with REST APIs. So, for those who don't know what REST APIs are, we will briefly say that they define a set of functions where developers can make requests and receive responses via the HTTP protocol. And because the REST API uses HTTP, they can be virtually used by any programming language and are easy to test. AsyncAPI specification, on the other hand, in the asynchronous world, is analogous to OpenAPI in the synchronous world. More concretely, the similarities between these two specifications are as follows. First, contract-first philosophy, also known as API first. They both prioritize design over implementation. Second, implementation agnostic. They are both compatible with various systems. Third, they have a similar syntax. Fourth, they use the same or similar tooling ecosystem. Fifth, they are both extensible. And finally, they both protect information consumption using different security schemes such as user and password, API keys, certificates, OAuth, OIDC, and many more. Now, let's see the differences between them. As we have seen, the two initiatives are significantly similar, but they also cover different fields in the API ecosystem. OpenAPI is a solution for REST, and AsyncAPI is a solution for message-based architectures. Each aims to serve a different domain. We could say that the big difference between the two is that OpenAPI, which focuses on synchronous communication, is used for HTTP protocol. AsyncAPI is used for multiple different protocols designed for asynchronous communication, such as Kafka, SNS, SQS, AMQP, MQTT, and WebSockets. These are two completely distinct architectures that require different specifications. That is the main difference between OpenAPI and AsyncAPI. But here, let's jump into the details. Microservices architecture breaks a large application into small manageable parts. Each part can be built and worked on independently, allowing different teams to work at the same time without getting in each other's way. Combining microservices in different ways is the most efficient strategy to create a new application. Making combinations as a puzzle, and REST calls were the main methods to stick those pieces together, acting as a glue. OpenAPI worked pretty well in synchronous communication, but it has its own limitations. People eventually realized that REST wasn't always the best tool for playing the microservices game. The search for a new kind of glue starts as a way of facilitating asynchronous communication. The Internet of Things acted as a real game changer. Since it was introduced, everything seems to be connected to the internet, and everything, including vacuum cleaners, heaters, oven, and cars. This is amazing, but it has its own complications because internet connection sometimes fails, which makes asynchronous communication the best solution to connect our gadgets. One example of these are smartwatches. They put many essential functions and information from the mobile phone on our wrist and measure many body parameters. Establishing asynchronous communication between microservices make them more reliable, faster, easier to scale, and more agile to adopt. Let's take a look at an example. The REST architecture, the one not having a broker, sends notice steadily to see if a process has been completed. So in this case, the waitress has to check every minute if there are new customers or not to send the orders to the kitchen and report it every time to the kitchen. The same goes for checking if the pizzas are ready or not. Consequently, there is a non-efficient use of energy and time wasted in unrealized actions. In the case of AsyncAPI, which works with event-driven architecture, the system has a broker, which acts as an intermediary between the messages and the system. This one coordinates and manages the entire communication process. AsyncAPI and OpenAPI are now both under the umbrella of Linux Foundation. That beautiful coincidence facilitates its combined use, opening a world of API possibilities that can be explored and covered. Being hosted by Linux Foundation, it is possible to say that AsyncAPI and OpenAPI share a wide common ground, well supported and stable. They share open standards with community governance. They should also continue to be integrated with open source toolings and commercial products. Both are heading straight to a future that's promising and wide open. If you find this video helpful, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more videos on the AsyncAPI and the API ecosystem.